2-1. This one line to left field. Waiting on it is John Bay. And this whirlwind ride of a 2025 season has come to its final destination. Your Brooklyn Cyclones, 2025 South Atlantic League champions. For the third time in franchise history, the Cyclones have won a league title. And for the first time at the full season level, your final score tonight, the Brooklyn Cyclones 2, the Hub City Spartanburgers 1. The team with the most wins in franchise history now has a championship trophy to go along with it. The Brooklyn Cyclones have done it, 2025 Sally League champions.
What's up, everyone? I am Ernest Dove. This is the New York Mets Dove Report. Let's start doing some interviews. But hey, there's more than just minor league players. I want to talk to some of the big folks, the big-time guys. And I got a really special guy here because I'm talking about the voice of your 2025 champion, Brooklyn Cyclones. I have the pleasure right now, and so do you guys, to hear and learn about the one and only Justin Rocke. Justin, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Ernest. It was great getting a chance to meet you down in spring training a couple of weeks ago, and thanks so much for having me on, man.
Oh, the pleasure's all, man. I was so excited to have this opportunity to meet you in the parking lot. That was a nice little sweet surprise.
Absolutely, I knew I recognized you.
Yeah, hopefully I tried to wear the shirt so everybody else can recognize me. For some that don't know, because again, I like to think, partial, very tiny credit on my back, there's a lot more Mets minor league fans out there, including MILB TV and some of the other streaming services to watch and listen to minor league baseball. But for those that aren't as crazed as I am of minor league stuff, if you can kind of hype yourself and can you introduce yourself to my fans and listeners and watchers, who is Justin Rocke and how long have you been in this position with the Brooklyn Cyclones and the New York Mets?
It feels like it was just yesterday that I started, but this is going to be my fourth season working for the Cyclones out on Coney Island. And, now I got to do math. 16, 17, 18, 19, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think this is my 11th year, I believe, now in minor league baseball, starting back in 2014. I bounced around a lot I spent 4 different minor league seasons working for teams in Florida, 4 different seasons working for teams in Tennessee. Got to see a lot of different Mets prospects in the Appalachian League with the Kingsport Mets back in the day, the Florida State League with the St. Lucie Mets when they were both a high A team and a single A team where they are now. And then as a New York guy, was always looking for a way to come back home. I was born and raised, born in Brooklyn, raised in Bergen County, New Jersey, in Closter, about 20 minutes away from the George Washington Bridge, and always had hoped to come home, especially as someone who grew up in a Mets household. And it's been quite the privilege of being with the Cyclones for the last now 3+ years. And in addition to that, I also do some work as an update anchor and on-air personality at SiriusXM. You can hear me there on Mad Dog Sports Radio. I'll have the remote updates in the morning on the MLB Network and NFL radio stations coming up later on this week. Also did some update work and served as an on-air personality at WFAN and the Infinity Sports Network. So I've bounced around all over the place. I've been following the Mets since the days of Benny Agbayani and Ray Ordonez and the original Patrick Mahomes and all that good stuff. And so it's been a lot of fun being involved with everything in Brooklyn and getting to see the next crop of Mets stars. And it's been a lot of fun so far this season, seeing so many of those guys really start to make an impact.
And they had real impact last season. And I know when I talk to some of the minor league players these past few years, I love to ask about some of the guys. Even when last year with Jonah Tong, you start talking to guys about, hey, you have like the best record in the league. And I wonder, from your thoughts and the experiences, what is it like to call like pretty much literally the best team in the entire league, like that winning culture of sorts at a minor league level? Do you even see it, feel it, or what's it like calling games, including a championship game at any level in pro sports?
I know we as Met fans like to be pessimistic a lot of times. I think it's just very much a New York trait. I'm very self-depreciating. If you've listened to any of our broadcasts, I'll make fun of myself more than one occasion throughout the course of the season. But I've called more winning with the Mets organization than I think I had in my previous, 7-8 years in minor league baseball combined. Last year was my 10th year in minor league baseball. That was the first time I had ever called games in the playoffs. The two of the last three teams that I've worked for that finished with winning records were with the Cyclones out on Coney Island. And, before that, I had gone, years and years without calling games for teams that finished with a winning record. So it was a lot of fun last season watching everyone have so much success. And honestly, watching what the first half was able to accomplish, 46-20, being able to win as many games as they did and have the best winning percentage in minor league baseball in the first half of the season was really incredible. And honestly, it's kind of crazy to think about how two guys who were on the Cyclones opening day roster last year in Carson Bench and Anthony Nunez were on opening day rosters this year. And obviously both have had an impact so far with the Mets and the Orioles. So it was a lot of fun showing up to the ballpark with that group, and you knew that they had a chance to win every single night. And it didn't matter what the score was. If it was a 1-run game in the 8th inning or even a 4 or 5-run game late, you knew they had the firepower to come back and win games. And we said it a lot last year. The comeback clones were hot, and they had a huge impact. And then the second half of the season, you saw a lot of those guys from the first half, Benj, Reimer, ultimately A.J. Ewing towards the second half of the season, go up to Binghamton and obviously lead them to an Eastern League championship, and had a losing record in the second half of the season, but came back on the final day of the regular season. And it was sort of a mentality that teams don't let us get one. And they got one on the final day of the regular season in Jersey Shore. And then from my memory, I don't think they trailed again the rest of the season. They won every single game. They went 4-0 in the playoffs and won the championship. And they've shown a great ability to overcome adversity over the last couple of years in the minor league system. And so it was a lot of fun last year. It was an incredible group, both on and off the field, and very excited for what's to come, not only right now in Brooklyn in 2026, but as the season continues to motor along and guys get promoted throughout the organization as well.
Yeah, and I know you won't be dating yourself on this one because it's a lot longer, but the number 25, it's the 25th anniversary of the Brooklyn Cyclones. So as like a combined question, what it's like being part of this kind of promotional thing with the 25th, and how it also ties into some of the promotions that'll be going on all season long. Are there any particular ones you're excited about, or just that experience with the added kind of thing of an anniversary, a championship team, and the new promotions now for the new season?
Yeah, no, it's really special to be a part of the team's 25th anniversary, because I still remember having, I think it was the Mets yearbook, maybe it was 2000, 2001, when they had a whole spread about Benny Agbayani, and they were promoting the then Queens Kings, who were not even a Mets affiliate. They were a Blue Jays affiliate playing at St. John's baseball field, and that was the precursor to who the Cyclones were to become. They became the Queens Kings, and then the Mets took over when they moved to Coney Island for the 2001 season. So to be a part of the 25th anniversary campaign is really special. We have a lot of different celebrations planned throughout the course of the year. I know we have a 25th anniversary championship ring giveaway at one point during the season, because obviously the 2001 Cyclones were co-New York Penn League champions. The championship games, or the championship series rather, canceled because of the 9/11 attacks that year. And then different things throughout the year celebrating the 25th anniversary. One of the fun things I'm working on right now is getting some pieces together on the website, some interviews together throughout the course of the season, celebrating that 25th anniversary with Mets prospects of the past, guys that have had success at the big league level, guys who are just huge names on Coney Island and never quite made it to the big leagues, but are still so loved and revered in Brooklyn for what they did in their time on Coney Island. And we'll have some stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks as fans can start voting on the 25th anniversary team, putting together a whole list of starters, relievers, catchers, shortstops, outfielders, the whole shebang, and going through some some names that we've seen have success at the big league level, and then a whole slew of other names that, like, oh yeah, I remember that guy from, I remember he was a big prospect, and then, injuries happened. That was a bummer, things like that. So it's been a lot of fun going through the names and going through the history, and it'll be fun reminiscing throughout the course of the year. I think we also have a 2001 road jersey giveaway. It's always fun seeing fans wear those around the ballpark, the retro throwback unis. So we'll be doing different things like that throughout the campaign, and it'll be a lot of fun not only celebrating the 25th anniversary, but celebrating the championship from last year. So a lot of things to celebrate and enjoy this year with the Brooklyn Cyclones.
That's awesome. And you know what? I also now back into a question of something you said a few minutes ago with the roster changes, like bench, everybody's moving up, and AJ Ewing. I'm very curious, because me being the prospect hugger and the minor league junkie, I try to update people. They just give me names on a list, and I try to come up with information on literally everyone. But professional, play-by-play, voice of a team, what is it like 6 games a week? On any given night, literally, you go to the ballpark prepped for the roster, and it could literally change 1, 2, 3, 4 names a night, a week, definitely a month. What happens to your game prep? Are there any experiences where you show up to the park and you're like, there's no name, right? What are we doing?
I mean, I feel like I'm definitely at an advantage where I am now as opposed to maybe in some other previous spots trying to find out information, high A as opposed to, single A or rookie ball. There's even less information at that level because they're younger into their careers. I mean, look, let's put it this way. I remember working in Daytona when Ellie De La Cruz joined the Daytona Tortugas, and I was texting people because I saw he was hitting like 500 in the complex league. Does anyone have any information on this guy? And literally people would text me back, no, you're going to be the first to tell us. So we've got a little bit more information these days, and the folks in the Mets organization, the last number of years, especially on the pitching side, the Luis Alvarados, the Jordan Krauses, the Dan McKinneys of the world, helping me and my broadcast partner, Johnny Gadamwitz, get more insight into the pitchers, talking to our managers, hitting coaches, learning more about hitters. So you have people to pick their brains about, particularly on your side of things. When you go into a game, when new players get added on a game day, generally, since it's our team, we'll have a little bit more insight before that move becomes official because we're the ones more often than not sending it out. That transaction and roster move, and have to put in information to our game notes. A lot of times we'll have a lot of prep done ahead of time because of the media guy just assuming which guys might end up on the roster either on opening day or throughout the course of the season. So you're a little bit ahead of the game there. It's a lot more challenging when those things happen on the opponent side. I remember one year working in Daytona where the Pirates affiliate in our league refused to give us a number for a player. We just had to guess whenever he came out of the field. He was playing right field. I don't know what number he's wearing until he's out there in the bottom of the first inning. There's other situations where, guys forget their jerseys from other teams, and you're literally playing, guess that face to that number because the numbers aren't matching up. Sometimes you find out in the middle of the game that someone didn't forget their jersey. The other team just didn't tell you that they were making a roster move, and you find out in the second inning, oh yeah, that wasn't either Danel Diaz or Marlon Perez. It was Alamo Hernandez who was pitching in that situation. And this sometimes you just have to have fun with it. Last year when we were playing the Renegades in Hudson Valley after the draft, it was mid-August, getting towards the final couple weeks of the season, and the roster the Renegades had on Tuesday when the series began, I would say almost half of the roster was different by Thursday in that series. A whole slew of guys got cut. Some guys got sent to Double-A, and then they added a whole slew of guys from Single-A and then through the draft. And then you're literally sitting there in, your hotel room or at the ballpark that night or the day of the game trying to get as much information into your book. And in, a lot of broadcasters nowadays, I personally use OneNote a lot to keep a running list of, stats and biographical information, stories about players, and just trying to fill as much as that in as you can before the game starts. So when they come up to bat or when they come up to pitch, you have some sort of idea of who they are and what their background is coming in. So it can be challenging. Thank God for the internet and things like that. I can't imagine how I can't imagine how Gary Cohen did it when he was calling minor league games in the late 80s and early 90s before he got the job with the Mets, because then you had no information. You were literally relying on word of mouth and hope somebody could give you a tidbit or a bit of insight, before you went on the air. Otherwise, you were sort of flying blind.
And I wonder too, even from the player perspective, we talked about this off air. When I was in the locker room, kind of meeting some of these players for the first time that I've kind of heard about and I hyped up in the past, and I started meeting some of them, when I said my full name, they say, "Oh, I know you. My family's been, watching you and following you for years, man. Thank you so much." It blew my mind. Now I'm wondering, as a play-by-play guy for these 4 years as well, specifically, when you see these guys kind of come and go up and run into them again, what's that experience like? Because you're literally their voice in the games, and also you're their voice for the family members that are tuning in. So what's that got to be like for you when they kind of see you again as that form of short reunions year after year?
It's special. It's very, very special. I'm very lucky, especially when you look at this Mets roster right now. I have guys that were on the most recent team I worked on in minor league baseball. There's also a guy on the roster that was on the very first team I worked on in minor league baseball. Tyrone Taylor, the first time I went to Citi Field as a credentialed member of the media after the Mets acquired him. And I said, "Yo, what's up, Tyrone?" And he looked at me for a few seconds because I had a lot more hair in 2014 than I did in 2024. And it took him a second to recognize me, but by the time he did, it was like, "Oh, what's up, J-Rock? What's going on, man?" And, catching up, I played him an old clip from the 2014 season, and, we were talking about old memories from working in Brevard County, which was special. And then, this year going to spring training and seeing the guys like Carson Bench and Christian Scott get excited to see you, and see so many different players, even on the minor league side, Jacob Reimer, AJ Ewing, especially in situations where they're not necessarily expecting to see you on a consistent basis. When you get that kind of hello and reaction, it's special because a lot of times you don't know what kind of impact you have on a player and their family until you hear it from them. I'm trying to do the best I can every single day. I try and tell the players and the coaches and the support staff as well, hey, if I'm doing right by you every day, then I'm doing my job. I am the liaison for a lot of times, at this level for these players, not only to the fans, but to their family and friends back home. And, you want to, do right by them. And when you get those messages, not only from the players, but their parents as well and their friends, it means a lot because there are times, especially during COVID, you talk about essential workers, people working in healthcare, essential services, people saving lives, helping people with their money, whatever. I'm just calling baseball games, man. It's not that serious. But when, you're the voice for somebody whose family is thousands of miles away or in a different country or whatever, it means a lot to them. And I've seen it not only with the Cyclones, but calling women's basketball games at West Point as well over the years. It's really special when you create that relationship, not only with the player, but their family as well. And, when they let you know how much it means to them, it's special. Definitely when they cross, over into the major league and the highest levels, because, there's so many people they interact with on a day-to-day basis. It's so easy to forget. I mean, we forget things all the time because we're running around like our chickens with the head cut off. And, so when you have those moments, it's really unforgettable and special.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I always love it. The players are just something else, especially the family members. I love the grandparents, especially some of the dads and stuff.
That was one of the best parts of the championship last year down in Spartanburg is after that game, winning the championship, being down on the field, celebrating. So many family members of players came to be there to celebrate. Getting a chance to meet Colin Houck's parents on the field after the game. I think I met like Haas Brewer's parents. Remember, I still have a vivid memory of Ronald Hernandez sitting in the hotel lobby afterwards, sort of soaking it all in with his mom on one side of him, his wife on the other side of him, and just talking with him afterwards, and exchanging thank yous for the entire season. It's those are the things you don't forget, because they're indelible memories, not only for me but for them and their families for their entire lives.
And then it's kind of maybe funny, not funny. Pretty much every name you mentioned on a championship team, here we are in 2026, the next season, they're all still back at the same level. And it's not always about doing really bad or doing really this. The Mets' depth in the farm system, I've been talking about it all offseason in spring. And then, sure enough, when the rosters have been announced, even guys like Houck, Hernandez, these guys are repeating the level. I was curious, even I asked you, even privately, even off the air, I was like, hey, man, does this seem like an older roster as well? Like they all belong in AA. And even you mentioned, I think, other A-ball teams, I think, are in the same situation roster-wise. Do you also just see it as a lot of teams with depth, or is it also, ever since they cut down the Kingsport teams and everything else, is this just the new norm even that you're seeing?
I think it's a mix of both. I think it really is a lot of the new normal without, the rookie ball levels and the short season levels, and you just have a much tighter constraint on how many players you're allowed to have on your domestic roster, and juggling, 60-day and full season injured list spots, which will clear some, roster space, for your affiliates across the organization. So it's tricky with that. And that's also part of my job, right, is to explain to fans like, hey, this person is here not because they haven't performed well enough to get to the next level. There is just a logjam, and there is not enough playing time for them at that next level. And it's sort of, what you see at the big leagues, why someone like they don't have Ronnie Mauricio down at, on the bench at the big league level. You have him down getting at bats every single day in Syracuse, because you don't want him sitting up there just waiting for one at-bat every 3 to 4 days when it's needed as a pinch hitter. Obviously, he's going up now with Juan Soto on the IL, and that's in large part because there are more opportunities for him to play as, Brett Beatty gets more comfortable in the outfield, and they utilize him more out there, and Jared Young as well after the success he had over the weekend in San Francisco. So I think that's a large part of my job, is explaining why guys are where they are, especially this time of year. You've seen it a lot the last few years. There tends to be a lot of reorganization and reshuffling towards the end of April and beginning of May, as those players who signed minor league deals, with invites to big league spring training, end up deciding to stick around at the AAA level for a few extra weeks or a month or so. Then they start opting out of their contracts if they don't get up to the big league level. That creates those spots, and then everyone sort of moves up into their place. Last year with the Cyclones, that was Marco Vargas and A.J. Ewing. They started down in St. Lucie the first month of the season, then they jumped up. For the Cyclones last year, it was Dylan Ross and Anthony Nunez in the bullpen. They were with the Cyclones through the first full week in May. Then they were up in Binghamton and beyond for the rest of the season. So I think it's a lot of that, because you see it throughout minor league baseball. Hudson Valley has an older roster. Jersey Shore, who the Cyclones are playing this week, has an older roster. And for me as a broadcaster, I'm all for it. It's great. It saves me a lot of prep time early in the season. Going through my OneNote right now before this interview at Jersey Shore, a lot of those guys were on the roster that last week of the regular season when the Cyclones were finishing up the season. So that helps with a little bit of prep. And it also helps for us as a broadcaster a little bit as well, trying to explain it to some of the younger folks around the office that, when players come back and, they immediately gravitate towards you, and there's a level of respect and appreciation for you. The guys who are new, the guys who haven't been there for the Cyclones this year, Mitch Voigt, Antonio Jimenez, Diverson Gutierrez, the list goes on. They say, oh, Ronald Hernandez and Colin Houck and Trace Wilhoit and Yoel Diaz, are saying, yo, what's going on, man? Hey, what's up, Poppy? He's, we can trust him. We can feel comfortable around him. We know he's going to respect our space and do right by us. And so that's something I'm always very, very appreciative of. The longer I work in an organization, is that, mutual respect and how that sort of trickles down to new coaches and new players. So it's very much just the way of the land in minor league baseball right now. And one of the messages from a lot of the coaches has been like, we know some guys feel like they should be further up in the ladder than they are to start the season. But the message is go out there, dominate, and force everyone's hand to say we can't keep you here anymore.
And I believe you made an excellent point during this discussion right now. Obviously, everyone's goal is to reach the major leagues. That's the point. That's the dream. But we have to get into the reality of certain things, competition, but also like where you're at and your status on the active roster that you're on. And I'm looking at even the Brooklyn Pen, and you have guys like Brett Banks, even Christopher Gomez and a Haas Brewer, talented arms. They pitched in innings in low A and high A even last year. And if you were to project with me just projecting in my own little opinions and scouting, you would kind of seem like those guys who were nice arms in 2025, they may be like major league terms, 7th, 8th, 9th inning guys now on this roster. So here they are repeating a level, but for the purposes of depth and high leverage, low leverage, you may have these type of arms that I'm excited about. They are kind of in the high A level, but now they may be the higher leverage setup men, closers. So that could be another thing like you discussed, hey, about playing time. There's starters and bench, of course, even in the minor leagues. But even in the relievers, I was curious to see a couple of these guys being back in Brooklyn, but maybe that's to your point. Now you have a guy like Brett Banks and Haas Brewer. Rather than being part of our pen, we want you to anchor it in 2026.
Yeah, and you started to see a lot of that in the playoffs last season. It was sort of a little taste of what was to come. Gregory Lois, Brett Banks, Haas Brewer, Dakota Hawkins, even, being a huge factor of closing out important games in the postseason, even in the blowout in Game 1 of the South Atlantic League Championship Series last year. Like, I think one are now going out there and throwing a scoreless clean frame in the playoffs, even in a 14-1 route, was such a huge lift of confidence. And he looked great in his 2/3 of an inning in his season debut on Saturday against Hudson Valley. So, I mean, that was a big talking point with Luis Alvarado is, Haas Brewer, Brett Banks. And Haas got some opportunities to close out games. He got some huge outs, closing out the first half North Division title against Aberdeen in his debut with Brooklyn in June last year. Of course, closing out the championship series against Hub City. But Brett Banks got huge outs in the 8th that day, Lois in the 6th inning that day. And these guys are now going to be tasked to do that consistently early in the season in Brooklyn. And if they succeed, because they are, they have experience in Brooklyn over the last year or so, they might be more inclined to push them up the ladder once they're ready. And I think the other aspect of it as well is also getting them used to environments, right? One of the benefits the Mets have with the Brooklyn Cyclones is they can get an experience of what city life is like before they have to endure it in the major league level. And talking to Jacob Reimer about that during spring training, and so many different players as well, Nick Morabito, Christian Scott, they said it was such a huge benefit for them to get that experience in New York City, and especially for someone like Scott who has been in the big leagues before, okay, I know what city life is about. I know what the subway is about. It's not overwhelming to me at an already overwhelming time when you're getting acclimated to the highest and best level of baseball in the world. So I think maybe getting some guys some extra time in that New York City life before they go up to Binghamton and Syracuse, and also just getting used to the environment and the weather. And there's a major difference in April and May baseball in Port St. Lucie, Florida, than it is in Brooklyn, Binghamton, and Syracuse. And so getting used to pitching in that cold weather, Brett Banks is, yes, he's had, a cup of coffee with the Cyclones in 23 or 24 and 25. But he'd never been on the Cyclones opening day roster. Haas Brewer was down in St. Lucie until June of last year. Lois had not pitched in Brooklyn earlier than August each of the last couple of years because of injury and him climbing up the ladder. So for those guys, this is the coldest baseball they've experienced in their professional careers. So that is part of the experience and the development for them as well. Is okay, what worked for us in June and July and August may not work for us in this environment in April and May. What adjustments do I need to make so I'm ready for not only opening day this year, but opening day maybe next year in Binghamton or Syracuse as they get ready to be part of the Mets bullpen as well.
And then also on the hitting side, you mentioned some of the players, and I figure let me bring it up too as the prospect guy and the rankings guy. Never good to rank humans, I know, my guy Teddy online. But
it's the nature of the business in minor league baseball.
I'm curious just to ask too, it came into my head because obviously you have the stars in Major League Baseball, the guys who make 20, 30, 40 million a year. The somewhat version of that in the minor leagues would be the high bonus kids and then also the top draft picks. So I'm wondering from play-by-play and from your perspective with the minor leagues, what happens when these top-ranked guys and top picks all over the news from drafts, like a Mitch Voigt, Antonio Jimenez, and then my guy, Diverson Gutierrez, who's an IFA kid kind of growing. When you have those guys come to an affiliate and an organization, is there even from a fan base standpoint, from a viewing standpoint, do you even feel some of the energy even in Brooklyn? They may know maybe some of those guys first. Does that bring extra excitement? And what's it like to have those type of personalities being even generated on that high level when they get there to you?
It's definitely a big deal. And I think a lot of it has changed over the last few years. And, growing up, and I'm sure you may remember this as well, Ernest, being, a Mets fan for such a long time, a lot was made of in the New York area, not just with the Mets, but with the Yankees as well. Like, who cares about the prospects? We're trading those guys away for big league players. We're making splashes in free agency. It wasn't so much about the homegrown guys, even though the homegrown guys were always the most beloved. Growing up with the Yankees, it was Jeter and Rivera and Posada and Pettit. With the Mets, it was David Wright and Jose Reyes and those guys. I still got their jerseys back at my parents' place in Fort Lee. Nowadays there is a lot more awareness about prospects. Like Jose Reyes didn't become a big deal, I remember, in terms of Mets prospect land until he was in the upper levels of the minors. In Brooklyn, the last few years, there's always been a buzz. In August of 2023, when the Cyclones got Ryan Clifford as part of the Justin Verlander trade, and Jet Williams and Jacob Reimer all joined the roster in the same week, there was a palpable buzz as the Cyclones were making a playoff push when the team returned back to Coney Island. Okay, we want to see these guys. Same thing in 2024. You're starting with Brandon Sproat. You had Clifford back. You had Nolan McLean still as a two-way player. There was such an interest in Nolan McLean at that point of the campaign that there was so many interview requests. There was one point during one of the weeks when he was with us, and he wasn't with the Cyclones for very long, where I just looked at him and said, I'm not letting you speak to the media the rest of the week. You've done more than enough. You could tell it was starting to wear on him a little bit, and that's also one of those things that players appreciate when you recognize they can be overwhelmed by that media stuff. And there can be a lot of requests, and just recognizing that. So there was a lot of buzz then. And then the same thing last year with Carson Benj also being a two-way guy coming out of college, Suero being a Bronx kid, Reimer coming back and hitting the ground running as well as he did. There was so much about it. And there's so much more information now about these prospects that people get invested earlier. One of the fun things now is, I'm sure it is for you as well, Ernest, getting text messages from friends. When's Elian Pena coming to Brooklyn? When's Elian Pena going to be here? When's Randy Guzman going to be here? And, the fact that, more and more average fans are knowing about that, in large part thanks to the great work that SNY and Odyssey Mets Radio have been doing, promoting them, but just the Mets organization as well, shining a spotlight on these players and having them be known before they are, part of the fabric in Queens. That has helped create a palpable buzz about these players when they arrive in Brooklyn. Everyone's always asking us in the office, who's the top prospects? Are we getting anybody good? Is there any, exciting new players that are going to be a part of our team in the next couple of weeks? everyone's trying to figure out who's going to be the next guy, because as they've been a part of it at this level, they've seen Jet Williams, they've seen Nolan McLean, they've seen Carson Bench, and the impact they've had as they've climbed the ladder. They want to see who's going to be that guy this go around, this month, this week. So it's a lot of fun seeing the excitement from the fans and seeing the excitement from my coworkers as well. And I think also the autograph hounds help a little bit with that, a little bit, for better or worse. When there's a big name prospect in town, when there's a line outside the player and media entrance gate on Coney Island.
Oh, of course. There needs to be a line for you. You're getting kind of famous though by the year. I mean.
I will say someone did recognize me as the broadcaster as I was walking out of the tunnel on Saturday. No one asked me for my autograph. I don't want to ruin anybody's baseball valuations by putting my autograph next to Mitch Voigt or Carson Bench's. So we try and keep the fans, valuable is valuable.
All right, fine. As we begin to kind of wrap up here, I want to kind of give you the floor as well to kind of give some shout outs. Maybe talk kind of mentors, role models, and also, hey, where can we find you? Not only for personal stuff, but where can we find you on the apps and streaming services to catch the Brooklyn Cyclones all season long?
Well, you can always follow me on social media. I'm at Justin Rocke on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it these days. That's Rocke with an E at the end, JustinRocke. On Instagram, it's the same, just a dot in between the Justin and the Rocke. You can always listen to the Cyclones online. Go to brooklyncyclones.com/listen, or you can just go to brooklyncyclones.com, tap that listen live button. You'll get connected to Johnny and I when we're on the broadcast anytime throughout the course of the season as well. If you have the Bally Sports Live app, it's free to download. Google Store, Apple Store, go download that. You can catch the Cyclones games for free, home and on the road. You can only hear our broadcast when we're at home, though. So you might want to try and get that, that audio sync up with the video and the radio feed. You can also get it if you have MILB TV or MLB TV. Cyclones games are always available through there. And as for mentors, I mean, I'm very lucky. Look, it's not an easy industry to make it in. I'm very thankful for my parents and my fiance for being so supportive of me. I'm very lucky to have so many great bosses around my career, from working in college summer ball as a college student to where I am now. The executive staff on Coney Island is incredible. Steve Cohen, Kevin Mahoney, my direct boss, Billy Harner, who have been around for so many years there. There are so many teams in minor league baseball that are cutting back on what radio broadcasts they're doing and whether or not they're sending their broadcasters on the road. And I do every game, home and on the road, whether the team's taking a plane to fly somewhere to the South Division or whether we're just going on an hour-and-a-half bus ride down to the Jersey Shore like we are tomorrow. I'm very lucky and very blessed that I get to do this every single game, home and on the road, to really get to be there and be ingrained with these guys and get to learn about them and tell their stories. And there are no shortage of mentors. I'm very lucky to have grown up in this New York City area and watch from the baseball side of things. We talk about it a lot on social media on the Mets side. Mets fans were spoiled, with the broadcasting side of things. Growing up, initially it was Bob Murphy and Gary Cohen calling it on the radio, and Howie on TV, and Gary Thorne filling in every now and then for him. And then obviously it, changed to Howie being on the radio and Gary, Keith, and Ron on SNY. And just watching them every day is such a great, crash course and play-by-play broadcasting, both TV and on the radio. And, over the years, getting a chance to know Howie and get to talk to Steve Gelbs. And, Kenny Albert, lives in the town that I grew up in New Jersey, and I've had the chance to pick his brain. And obviously he's done every sport under the sun over the years. So there's been no shortage of just incredible broadcasters to learn from. And all my bosses before I had a number one job, Dave Walkovic in Brevard County, Mick Gillespie when I was working in Tennessee, to learn from them was so incredibly special and helped make me the broadcaster I am now. So Mike Breen obviously doing the Knicks games, listening to him Been very lucky to get to talk to and pick the brain of so many great broadcasters throughout the years. And for any young broadcasters who might be watching on this, who are thinking of breaking into the industry, whether it be on the minor league side or whatever it is, one of the best pieces of advice, the one time I got a chance to meet Vern Lundquist, was what he told me when I was still a college student was, the answer to every question in this industry is yes. Whether you know how to do it yet or not, the answer is yes, and you figure it out along the way. You don't want any doors to close on you. And, there's so many things I did not know how to do in this industry, whether it be broadcasting wise or media relations or graphic designing, whatever it is. There's a lot of things I've picked up along the way working in professional sports and working in minor league baseball specifically. That just made me a more well-rounded, not only broadcaster, but professional. So just be willing to dive in. We'd be willing to learn. And I've been very lucky to learn from so many people from so many different walks of life.
And I was lucky to have you on this show. Thank you so much for your time. I knew we were going to go way over. We probably thought, because we're talking sports, we're talking baseball, and we're talking Mets. Thank you so much for your time, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll obviously stay in touch. All Mets fans out there now know about Justin Rocke. Obviously, again, like you said, go on the Brooklyn Cyclones website, not just for the box scores, but even for the roster, so you know who's on the team every week. And also remember to check the listen button. Start watching, listening to some of these great games for the future Mets of tomorrow. That's me. That's our time. New York Mets Dove Report. I'm going to have more interviews to come. I got my weekly reports. Everything is on the way. Thank you so much, everybody. Please remember to subscribe to the New York Mets Dove Report. I'll see you guys next time.